Worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. Big King Sadiq hollering at you one more again. Yes, indeed. Come on in, family. As typically, we tend to allow a couple of minutes for everybody to file on in so we can have this wonderful conversation together today. I love you all and I appreciate you for being here with me. Let's do some talking to with one another today. True indeed. Everybody file on in. Come on in. Come on in, folks. Come on in. I'm gonna give a few moments. I'm here, ready to talk to you. True indeed. Welcome, worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. Announce yourself if you like. I'd love to welcome you to the conversation. Thank you tremendously for being here with us today. True indeed. Worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. All right. Hello, I froze for a second there. Okay, we're good. All right, folks. All right. I'll allow maybe like another 2 minutes for everybody to get in, and then I'm gonna just go ahead and start, and I'll catch anybody up who comes in. Yes, indeed. All right. I'm down to one more minute. I'm down to one more minute. All right. Uh oh, I know what I neglected. So I'm gonna get ready to. I know what I'll do. I'll send out the. That's fine. Yeah, yeah. I better ring the alarm because it's sounding fine. Right. Shout out to Tenor Saw. That's just homage and respect, brethren. True indeed. I better ring the alarm, see if I can get folks to come on in with me. All right, now I'm ringing the alarm here. Sound, sound, sound. All right. All right. Another treat. Another treat for you folks. This week it looks like we are going to be simulcasting, seeing. All right. Uh, okay. We got all sorts of things going on today, but this is a interesting and somewhat controversial bit of subject matter that we got going here. Uh, Even more so than last week, I believe. Last week certainly fit into that category, and we saw all sorts of forms of interruption and delay, right, associated with that one. But we still did it. We still had an opportunity to go ahead and have a conversation with one another. We were able to learn from one another, which is always our goal. It is beautiful for us to be able to do so. And yeah, we're going to keep on doing the same thing today. We got a couple of little obstacles here, looks like. And yeah, man, we're gonna see if we can overcome them. Uh, in magnificent fashion and get into this important subject matter and get into a conversation that everybody can grow from, right? So let's do that right now. I'm ringing the alarm. I'm manually sending out the alarm to folks and see if we can't get this going. Allow me another minute to 2 minutes, folks. I apologize for the interruptions and the delays this evening. The beautiful thing is, for those who are going to catch this later, you can always fast forward up to about the 9 minute mark, and you'll be right at the start of things. Oh wow. Um, okay, folks. Give me about another minute, minute and a half, and we're rolling here. I want to get the information out and rolling, um, even if just for folks who will watch this later, right? But I certainly would love a conversation on this subject matter. Okay, and here we go. All right. I see. I said the 9 minute mark. It looks like it's going to be later than that. But I'm here, folks. I'm here. I promise if you're coming right now, I'm here. And we'll be together. And we're going to get this done for sure. All right. All right. Today's podcast is brought to you by love. True that. I do love all of you and I appreciate all of you. And it is our Creator's love that has brought us forth into manifestation and has brought you in with me right now. If you feel like you want to do so, please announce yourself in the chat. I love to properly welcome you to the conversation, but I thank you for your presence and for being here with me now. I'm trying to go ahead and see if I can ring the alarm right at one time and get as many folks um, on for this week as possible. But either way, I'm going to start in about a minute just to present the information and see what kind of conversation we can start up. Because I love the way that we grow together. True indeed. And that helps us to build what? The worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. True indeed. Deanne, welcome. Thank you, dear, for being here with me. We're going to talk about something that I know you would appreciate in its complexity, the depth of it, and the importance of it, right? And I'm glad that you're here with me. Thank you so much, dear. All right, I'm ringing the alarm a little bit, trying to see if I can get a few more folks in. So give me about another minute, and I'm gonna jump in. We're gonna just start doing it. All right, I'm sending out the alarm. I was saying earlier, ring the alarm, and on the sound of time, and I have to give proper respect, homage, and credit to Tenor Saw. Excuse me, little one. Hope I didn't want to hurt nobody. But Tenor Saw, that's his song, right? So please look him up and that song. I love it. And I'm attempting to ring the alarm right now on a few folks and see if we can spark up another lively and productive conversation. I just love building with y'all, right? I truly do. All right. Few more, and I'm about done here, y'all. Thank you so much, Deanne, for your patience, dear, and your faithfulness, right, my friend? I truly appreciate you and everyone as we continue to build this. A few more. Almost done ringing the alarm. Ah, shout out to Tenor Saw. At the end of the podcast, I'm gonna probably have to play that song. Heather has a family reunion today. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, dear. And I hope Heather truly enjoys her event, and we should all get on and talk and catch up in general, right? Aside from this, um, just a couple more. I'm almost done, and then whoever jumps on, they jump on. Whoever doesn't, maybe they can catch it later on. But I will certainly hope to get as many people in on this conversation tonight as possible. Last week was a very important subject Um, I still think I never did get to do a sort of a refresher raw data video on that, but I still do plan on doing that. Welcome you, someone else come in. Welcome you, and if you feel like it, please announce yourself in the chat. I love to properly bring you on in and welcome you to the conversation, right? But yeah, so I still feel like I need to do that raw data video on last week, um, because that was very powerful. Um, so that's in the works. And today's subject is similar in nature, um, but different and certainly with perhaps maybe even more consequences, right? Um, okay, hold up. Almost done here. Welcome, 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 folks. Ringing the alarm. I see a few folks coming in. Hey, Heather made it in anyway. Thank you, Heather, so much. I hope you enjoyed your family engagement. Thank you so much, dear. Um, okay, folks, I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. Some of these may not get sent out this week, and we'll catch up next week. Well, not just we'll catch up next week. They can catch this, and then you know what I mean. Y'all know what I be meaning. I'm just having, I'm having a good time with y'all as always. I love this forum once again. Um, I probably haven't expressed enough how much this forum does mean to me, and how much I truly appreciate y'all. Um, Thank you, truly, for helping to make this. This is a dream come true for me. Just so you know, one of many that have begun to come true, and you all have been a part of making that happen as we continue to forge our way forward and establishing this new high vibrational frequency paradigm, right? And I like to say that looks like peace, love, respect. Worldwide movement, peace, love, respect. All right. Okay. Okay, I am finishing up. I'm just about done here. I know I say that a lot. That was a funny looking face. Okay, y'all, I'm just being silly now. I'm about to get into this. Good thing I have prepared a little bit in terms of knowing what direction I want to go with this. This is really important information. This is a very um, I want to say up front, I don't present this information for anyone to become depressed or upset or drawn down into a low vibration at all, right? We talk about things like this because it's important. It's part of our existence, right? Part of our human experience that we're having now together. And the important thing is that working together and spreading knowledge and awareness is one of the first steps to us taking the proper, compassionate action, right? So that does make this very important for us to have this communication with one another and make sure that we increase the awareness first, right? Step number one, we got to increase the awareness so that folks have the opportunity to make a sovereign decision to step forward with compassion and to act, right? Okay. All right. Last week we talked about um, in summation, we talked about being compromised or influenced um, in many ways by technology, right? And okay, let's see, make sure it looks like we're good. We're good. We're good. We are good, folks. Finally, we're good. Okay. um, and this week is a little bit different. We're going to talk about your actual physical body being compromised, right? Um, some just to throw out some theatrical references and also historical references like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, right? You all remember that. Um, and just to throw the concept out there and how humanity does that. I'm not giving you science fiction today, folks. We're going to take a look at some things that perhaps now we all do know that most of what comprises mythology and what influences Hollywood and other theatrics is often based in some level or form of truth, right? We take the true story, we fluff it up with theatrics. We put our word to word versions on it. We know what happens when you take something and you go around the room with it, how it changes by the time it makes it back around the other part of the room. We understand all of those things, right? So we don't necessarily just take things literally, and we certainly don't take theatrics as something literal. But again, with enough what's the word I want to use, discretion, first of all, we're able to sort of sift through and get to those truthful roots that have provided inspiration for these things, right? And certainly in this day and age, there are many things that we thought to be quote unquote fictional or fictitious that we've now found out are based in a whole lot of truth, right? First of all, um, I do want to state quickly that the information I present today is sort of a summation of what I've gathered on my journey. Now, we're talking about my entire life's journey. I've spent probably close to 20 years in theological studies, sociological studies, historical studies, ufology, right? All before my spiritual awakening about 7 years ago. And then since then, I've incorporated metaphysical studies, um, sort of reintroduced myself into physics and genetics, which I did have a general understanding and background of, just as part of my educational background. Um, but I just wanted to let you all know this is sort of a summation of the information that I've gathered along this journey, right? Both literally researchable and esoteric. So, I always say never just take what I say or what anyone says for that matter as like law or literal fact, right? Always research it, get the background on it. Um, um, for any literal text that you can research and get to the source of. Always look at the source of information, and then also make sure that you check with yourself that it resonates. Right, that's always a very valid and important sort of Geiger counter to point you in the direction of what is right information for you. Right. Okay. Now, I do want to start with the fact that I don't know how many of you are well enough versed in the fact that recently our United States Congress, right, met and had some very important and incredibly historical hearings um, within the calendar year here. Not in 2024, it actually occurred in 2023. Um, I believe they began in 2023. But anyway, these recent hearings were on the issue of UFOs slash UAPs, right? UFOs, unidentified flying objects, UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, right? These are terms that were used on the in the hearing and are sort of accepted in the genre, right? The scientific genre of ufology. And also the extraterrestrial pilots, right, or inhabitants of these vehicles. Okay, and also the potential for these vehicles and beings to not only be extraterrestrial, but in some instances potentially extra dimensional. All right. Folks, this is a conversation that took place on the floor of Congress, right? So we can remove the stigma that you may have, or that anyone around you in your life may have, surrounding this issue or this subject matter. I know a lot of people have grown very accustomed to being dismissive of this subject matter, but it is and has entered into the realm of being something that is openly acknowledged as having some factual basis. Okay, we're talking about, you know, whatever the level of scientific confirmation that folks have looked for, and for professional quote unquote confirmation that folks have looked for is available now. We've seen professionals, right? So quote unquote professionals. We've seen, service members. We've seen authorities on the subject step forward, actually, literally on the floor of Congress, and testify to these things. Okay, so the instant dismissal that has typically taken place in the past, we really need to throw away, because honestly, at this point, it really only displays a certain level of ignorance, right? And I don't say that in a combative or confrontational way, but just in a way that acknowledges how much this has actually come out and come to the forefront. Right? It's not just conjecture anymore, folks. It's really not. And it's not just a matter of opinion or conspiracy theory. There is factual basis. So I wanted to say that just to sort of open up the basement of the conversation, or the floor of the conversation, as we build up, right? That's what we're building. You're building with Big King today and always. All right. Now, what I'm going to do, folks, yes, discernment. I glanced at the chat, and Deanne had helped me out from when I was stuck on the correct word I wanted to utilize earlier, and it was discernment. Thank you. All right, back into what I was saying. I'm going to just try to wrap this up as quickly as possible, because I want to get to what you think faster, right? Okay. So we now understand factually that there are some craft, right, that have there quite a number of craft that have quote unquote visited this planet from other origins outside of the planet. All right. And potentially some of those origins being interdimensional. Okay, I think it's important that I have that understood. Naturally, as crafts would suggest inhabitants and or pilots, there are beings that would be associated with these craft, right? So we are also talking about extraterrestrial beings and and potentially extra dimensional beings. Okay, we have those things established. All right. So what does this actually mean, and what level? What does this mean in terms of our daily life, right? And what level of interaction has already occurred on the planet? Now, this is where it starts to get deep and pretty tricky, right? Um, I have gathered, like I said, a great number of sources, a great sort of cachet of information from a great number of widespread sources, right? Um, Very diverse sources. We're talking about sources from, again, the scientific community, um, including and notwithstanding physicists, um, uh, certainly very many individuals who would be in the genre of study referred to as ufology. Um, I give a great amount of credit to Dr. Delbert Blair, not only for the vast amount of information that he has supplied, but also inspiration that he's certainly given me, and a great many others. And I, for one, do not want to see his legacy ever be minimized or forgotten, right? And his contribution to the metaphysical um, genre and just to us all in general, and enlightening us on a great many things, should never be underestimated or understated. Dr. Delbert Blair, the late great Dr. Delbert Blair, right, giving us this information um, from the 1970s until his fairly recent departure within the decade, right? Okay. Also, very important. I want to give also some credit to David Icke. Um, he's taken a great deal of the hits as well, in terms of skepticism. So, if for nothing else, I think that he deserves some recognition and for that. But also, he's presented some very great information himself. Now he has, you know, let's just say that Dr. Delbert Blair has presented some of the things that Mr. Icke has presented long ago and before Mr. Icke. But to get that straight as to who superseded who, we would Dr. Delbert Blair. David Icke comes later, more than a decade later into the conversation. But he did and does have some very valid and important informational contributions that I think should be recognized. The least of which, certainly not his interview of the Zulu spiritual leader. Um, uh, oh my goodness! Please forgive me for not having instant recall of his name. Um, I'll get back to that later. But in this interview, um, he went into some very deep and important knowledge and confirmations, right? Where much of the things, or many of the things that the ufology community has sort of touched on, he has given verification through that other ancient way of that we've talked previously about on this podcast, of relaying information through word of mouth, right? And um, the tradition of making sure that we keep those oral relayances alive, where we relay things orally and keep them sacred, both in that manner and in the manner of things that we scribe, right? But scribe is what I meant to say if I didn't pronounce that fully. So I will also say that, yeah, he verified and talked about some very deep things in terms of different species um, that he had encountered, um, that he has information of, that has been relayed through centuries, right? Through oral tradition, and some things that go back centuries but are still in occurrence on the continent. I refer to the continent of Africa today, right? Folks, there are interactions and have been interactions with otherworldly beings throughout humanity's history, right? Um, and this is just something that is a fact of our reality that we need to wrap our heads around, and the potential implications of it, and what interaction with those otherworldly beings looks like for us and means to us, right? That's what we need to wrap our heads around, in my opinion, so that we can process that one properly and be prepared to take whatever appropriate compassionate action is necessary, right? We're being adults about this, folks, right? The whole point of this is that we move forward in spiritual maturity and no longer as spiritual children or neophytes in our existence and our experience, right? We're ready to move forward to higher consciousness and the higher levels of um, spiritual maturity that come along with that. Okay. Um, so I'll go quickly now into my experiences, right? First of all, for those who I've not shared this with, I am a contactee, I guess. I've never actually put the term on myself in that way, but and there'll be those in my family like, oh, for real, boom, but they don't remember the times that I literally went trying to tell them what happened and they blew it off, right? Strength, I tried to tell my family when this occurred, folks, and those around me, not just my family, but even some of my friends. I tried to tell this. I have one friend, but I remind him about it now. Like, what has it been? 30 years? This is like 30 years later, something like that, maybe more than that. And he blew it off to such a great degree that he doesn't even remember me telling him this, right? So, but anyway, hey, thank you, Heather. It was amazing, right? I'll quickly tell y'all the story, but I do want to conserve time because we still got a lot more to get into. But there's a street called Aber around the part of Penn Hills that I grew up in post age 11, right? And on this Aber Road is what it is. Cool, Heather. On Aber Road, I was walking, which is not strange. You know, I was known, and many of us were known to just walk through our neighborhood. It's that kind of a suburban neighborhood that you just walk through, right? At night, and it's just like a nice stroll. It's not exactly like country roads or nothing. There's houses and there's lights, but it's also not lit like a city block, right? So you have a very peaceful neighborhood type stroll, right? So I'm walking on Aber Road, and this particular part of Aber Road where the bus turns, and a lot of people who are up for that way know where I'm referring to. the bus turns from another street onto Aber, and there's a sort of a sharp bend. And then a little bit, let's say, give it maybe 45, 50 yards up the street from that point, there is a very woody area, not necessarily a forest, but it's very open because a lot of the trees and so forth have actually been cut down to make way, for like power lines. And if any of you have ever saw those balls that they put on lines so that airplanes can see the power lines and whatnot when they're flying by and don't accidentally fly into anything. So anyway, that just gives you an idea of how open this space is. It's almost like a cliff, sort of, right? Okay, cool. So I'm walking past this area, and I mean, it's a good little stretch, right? It's not like, 15 paces and I'll be out of this area. It's a good 15-minute walk in itself, just this stretch of the road. So I'm on this stretch of the road and I'm walking. It's nighttime. It's dark. It's maybe like, I don't know, it's a summer night. It's maybe like 9:30, 10 o'clock, maybe even a little bit later than that. Not too much. Probably not past 11. But anyway, it's a fairly moonlit night. I don't remember if it was exactly a full moon or not. But I'm walking, and all of a sudden, I get this feeling that just came over me, like real strong, really fast, like something like when you feel like a presence, so to speak, like somebody come in a room or something like that, right? But you don't actually see them, you just feel them first. So I got a feeling something like that, and something told me to just turn my head sharply over into like this open area, right? And as I did that, this ship arose, right? I hesitate to use the word arose because it was kind of just there, or at least it got there so quickly that I didn't exactly see it like rise up or descend down. For all I know, it may have just like, I doubt it materialized, but it may have like decloaked or something. I'm just throwing out there a guess at what happened, but I'm giving you a description of what it was like for me. So it was there, right? And this ship literally looked like, it didn't look like a saucer. It was pretty big. It was I've seen airplanes before, like fairly close, like low flying air. We've all seen low flying airplanes, and you can get a good idea of how the size of the airplane. Plus, we've seen airplanes at airports, and I have as well, right? So I know pretty familiar with the size of an airplane. This was bigger than that, maybe lengthwise the size of about 3 airplanes. Okay. But there was a section that had like these, but it wasn't exactly saucer shaped. It was, I want to say cigar shaped, but I don't mean that it was tubular. I mean that the part that I could see was shaped sort of like a cigar, but it seemed like there was some depth, like going back. You know what I'm saying? Like it had some area to it. Okay. So there was a section that had like literally these windows. Okay. And these, for lack of a better way to say it, these people were in the window. Now, what they looked like, as far as I can recall, right? They were like a real interesting bluish. And first of all, they were humanoid, didn't look a whole lot different from us. Not a whole lot, but a little bit in the face, right? A little more basic in the face, right? And when I mean basic, I mean like you look at me, you see a lot of different facial features. And as I talk, you see my face move in a lot of different ways. Like their faces seemed a little more basic than that, right? But yet, like, and I am not trying to bring emotion necessarily to it, but like kind of beautiful, right? And definitely their color was like bluish, but I mean, there's a million different shades of blue, right? So to describe their shade of blue would be like somewhere in between this shade of blue behind me, which is almost blue grayish, and you might could also say that about their skin, almost blue grayish. But yet it also had this sort of luminous quality about it. I don't mean necessarily like they were actually glowing, but their skin, right? Their skin was like kind of like luminous, like almost glowing. But anyway, I'm gonna try to wrap this up and just say that they waved at me and smiled at me, and we made a connection. And like I was kind of half stunned, half frozen, honestly. And I can like reluctantly kind of remember waving back, like, but I was literally a little bit, you know, they say you can be in like a paralyzed state. I was a little bit like that, but not 100%. That's a good way to describe it. And then they were gone. I don't necessarily recall if they ascended or what, but they were gone. Now, this lasted probably, just a guess, all of maybe, I don't know, between 45 seconds and like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, but probably no longer than that. And that was my experience with an actual craft and people or beings inside of it, right? But I also later in my life, and not too long ago, have had different experiences. I've had several experiences with orbs, right? One time, I was on the phone with my friend right now. My friend who lives out of town, lives in well, lives out of town. Anyway, and we were on the phone. I was getting ready to go in the show, so we just chopping it up real quick. And then this sort of amber-like colored orb, I'm looking up at the sky and I'm like, hey man, I'm looking at these stars, man, and this one joint is like moving. And this thing literally came from a distance that I would have thought it was a star to like close, okay, close to me. Close enough that like I would say it couldn't have been any more than, first of all, as it got closer, I saw it wasn't that large and it wasn't giving off light in the same way, obviously, that like a star would, but it was glowing and had some brilliance to it, right? Um, but the distance couldn't have been any more than, I'm gonna say, 150 feet tops, if that, you know, maybe not even more than 100 feet, somewhere in that range. And it was there. It kind of like hovered right above me. So it descended and hovered right above me to the point. I'm talking to my friend the whole time while this is happening. He could tell you this if we was, you know, I'm on the phone with him talking about this. And to the point I said, man, I'm gonna call you right back. I gotta record this. He said, all right, boom. I got off the phone. I started recording it and I did record it. Sadly, I don't have that phone anymore. But I recorded it on my phone. It hovered over top of me for a while, just kind of like making some different little, not anything drastic, certainly not like any sort of aerial craft we could describe, right? Um, wasn't like a helicopter or anything. This thing was moving like free flightingly, like a fly or something like that. Its movements, right? But again, it wasn't that big. It was an orb, maybe like the size of my head is what it seemed like in size. So anyway, and don't make the big head call me. Anyway, so this thing made this few little movements or whatever, and eventually sort of flew off in like not a bouncy line, but almost like that, right? And just flew away from me. Other times, probably on at least three different instances, um, and one of which not that long ago, I had similar orbs, but these orbs were more like the sort of light or energy around them was more sparky, if that's a way I could describe it, right? It was like sparks coming off of it and was even lower and closer to me, but did not last very long and sort of sped off and like fizzled out. It wasn't going down, it was going horizontally, and it went from like a stationary, it's almost like it was there watching me. And when I noticed it, it just like fizzled out of the screen, like almost like a flare would lose its brilliance and fizzle out. But it did so in like, it was like it'd be watching. I turn my head, see it, and it goes and fly off and fizzle out like fairly quickly. By the time it was 50 feet away from me, it had already fizzled out. That happened to me about 3 different times. So enough about my experiences with extraterrestrial / potentially extra dimensional craft beings and phenomena. All right, now stay with me, folks. Let's get back into how this deals with the subject matter. We have to lay all this out. I had to lay all this out, and you'll see that it sort of gives framework for how we can make this correlation. Now, the correlation I'm talking about is there any relation to these phenomenon and the phenomenon that we refer to as spiritual possession? Okay. Anyone, or rather, many people who are fairly well versed in the ufology department or genre will tell you that much of the interaction that human beings have reported with extraterrestrial beings or / extra dimensional beings is of a psychic nature or mental nature, right? And that is something that I think we can start to begin to understand the framework of the relationship between the different phenomena. Okay. Because certainly spiritual possession is something that's an internal thing. It happens on those subtle layers in your psyche, in your mind, on a spiritual layer or an extra dimensional or multi-dimensional layer or level, right? There is, if we quite literally, by definition of what we refer to as invading spirits or demons, right? These are literally, because they're not of this dimension, right? Literally extra dimensional beings. They are of some other dimension, right? Even if you say even if you look at this, and I'm not to look through this subject matter, fine, but even if you're saying from a religious context that these are like demons or something and from a demonic realm, you're not talking about this dimension. You're talking about a demonic dimension or some other form of a dimension of existence that these things would hail from or exist at or on. Okay. So we have established that definition, or that equality in definitions, that these invading spirits or demons are extra dimensional or multi-dimensional. Um, in some way, they are not of this dimension. All right. That's important. Again, now we can start to see and make the correlations between what we already have uncovered is out there, right? Um, and what we have experienced in terms of interaction with human beings and these otherworldly beings that we're now learning more about. Okay. Um, just to give some other context, um, National Geographic even made a very interesting video. Caught my attention right away about how some ants have been studied to be taken over by a certain parasite, okay, that it invades the actual brain, the skull. It goes into the skull of the ant, okay, think about the ant's physiology, um, takes over the nervous system and the actual movement and behavior of the ant, right? But does so in such an insidious way that the ant no longer, even though it's got like a small protrusion from its head where this thing has invaded, um, and some have described this parasite in a fungal manner as well. But anyway, this parasite has done so in such an insidious manner that the ant doesn't greatly stick out from the rest of the ant community, right? Um, you see the ant continuing to follow along in the lines of activity or chores or the business of the ant community that they're attending to at the time, until the ants come in the path of dung from cows. Now, the interesting thing about it's already interesting that this thing has taken over the nervous system of the ant, and done so in such a low-key manner, an insidious way, that it's not been detected at all by any of the other ants and is blending in. Okay, paint the picture. Then when the ants come near, or sort of their line, because ants move in a line, their line goes past dung of a cow. The ant that is infected with this parasite peels out of line and starts to sort of like circle the pile of dung. Now, none of the other ants are doing this. Okay, so this shows you where this ant has been completely taken over by this parasite, this parasitic being, right? Microscopic though it may be, or not microscopic, but very extremely tiny, and has taken over the ant completely. Moves the ant according to its agenda, which is actually trying to get to the cow. So much so that now that it has been alerted to the cow's presence by the cow's dung, it moves to blades of grass in areas where there are many piles of dung that cows would be grazing in, and then goes and perches itself on the tip of blades of a blade of grass that a cow would likely come along and graze. Sure enough, a cow comes along, grazes, eats the ant and the parasite on the tip of the blade of grass, and this parasitic entity is now in the gut of the cow. And then because of studies later on of the cow and actually opening the cow up, they see that this parasite then has invaded the liver of the cow, and that was the actual targeted area the whole time. The liver of a cow. It invaded and completely took over another species, an ant, to covertly and insidiously make the ant, like the ant was its puppet or zombie, follow its directive based on its agenda to get to the cow's liver. Think about the level of insidiousness. Think about the level of intelligence this little parasite exhibited. Think about the manipulation of the ant. All of these things, right? Now, National Geographic gave you an actual occurrence of this in nature. Take those concepts and apply them open-mindedly, right, to the interaction that would occur between human beings and these other phenomena, right? What would that look like? Okay? Could that potentially, especially if we're talking about extra dimensional beings, could that look like what we have typically termed as spiritual possession? Think about this, folks. Someone's vessel being taken over by another being that obviously is not of this dimension, so by literal definition is an extra dimensional being. That's what we're dealing with. Okay. When you interface the two, what I just told you about the example of that ant, and more importantly, the parasite that took over, manipulated, and controlled the ant. Of course, by the way, the ant met its demise. The ant was the parasite literally took over the ant and led it to its demise. All in accordance with following the parasite's agenda. Keep those concepts in mind, right? And apply them to this phenomenon. Incredible. When you then factor in what we previously discussed about what we now know of the existence of extra dimensional and extraterrestrial beings having presence on this planet and have had so, it seems, throughout humanity's history. All right. I've gone on longer than I really wanted to. I have still a ton more to present, so hopefully it can come out in conversation. I see a couple of you are still with me. Please, any questions, comments, or statements that you have, let's go. Jump on in the chat, flood on in the chat, and hit me whatever question you might be able to that you want to come with, and or statement or comment, and let's talk about this, folks. Please, let's talk about this, because we need to start to take an open-minded view of what this means, what this means and what it looks like in our society. How many people have had some sort of interaction in this way? We know that there are thousands of cases of people reporting abductions and or some sort of interaction that they feel has gone against their will, right? Involving it. So let's cross reference the phenomenon and start to say, wait a minute, can one phenomenon sort of be bringing an explanation to the other, right? And since we know verifiably that there is factual evidence, right, of extraterrestrial and extra dimensional craft and beings and or entities, however you want to state that, then we can apply that knowledge to this conversation and sort of develop or come up with some picture or visualization of what that actually looks like, right? What would it look like if there's a nefarious extra dimensional being that would have the ability to compromise someone's hold over their own vessel or physical body through their own consciousness and their own conscious connection to it or spiritual connection to it? What would that look like if that could be compromised, right? Has this happened to anyone or perhaps many people? All right. Now there's other levels of this. We know that there have been in the ufology community, we understand in the genre that there have been on the planet multiple genetic manipulation programs, if you will, conducted by external forces, extraterrestrial or extra dimensional, right? We talked about that even on the podcast where we talked a little bit about how scientists are understanding now that what we've previously referred to as the missing link is an example of genetic tampering, so to speak. Okay. So obviously, if we were genetically tampered with at some point along, or if some of humanity has been, right, then there are those who have done the tampering, right? Folks, we have got to expand ourselves to open up to these realities because it has proven to be part of our existence and our experience. Okay. Deanne, thank you for coming in. Deanne says, I used to see blue orbs along the ceiling and the corners of the room when I was a child quite frequently. Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Deanne. Powerful, powerful. Now, just in what I have surmised from my studies and experiences, that sounds to me, and I don't claim to be any particular expert other than the qualifications I shared with y'all, right? That sounds to me like extra dimensional contact or interaction, right? Much about the orb phenomenon to me feels like extra dimensional, but I don't rule out the potential for orbs to also be or potentially to be extraterrestrial, right? Terrestrial, remember, folks, that the planet Earth used to be referred to as Terra, right? So that's where extraterrestrial, Terra terrestrial comes from. But yeah, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Deanne. If anybody else, and I've had some experiences that I would have referred to or probably classified as like ghost like experiences early on in my life, very early on. Um, and I now look at those as extra, which they were, in fact, scientifically, because they were not part of this dimension, our typical experience in the 3D environment. I look at those as extra dimensional interactions and or experiences, right? Um, okay, Deanne comes back in. I have seen different meanings assigned to different colors of orbs. Indeed. Now, what's very interesting is our auric bodies or our aura, right? Our aura has many different layers, or I refer to them, and many others do, as auric bodies, right? And these different layers of your aura have different colors. Now, these different colors tend to correspond to the different colors of your chakra, just as the different chakra tend to correlate directly with these different levels or layers of your aura or these auric bodies, right? And I've also, I believe, talked about on the podcast previously how these different um, chakras and or layers of your aura or your auric bodies also correlate to different organs and or organ groups or functional groupings within your physical body, right? So we can associate those colors with such as well. So wouldn't that be very now I also understand esoterically that these colors are not just germane only to the human experience, but these colors have cosmic importance and representative meaning, right? Which I'm not going to try to get into breaking that down. I only have fledgling knowledge of that myself. Um, so, yeah, I'll leave that for everyone to research individually on your own. But there is definitely a lot of different meanings that have been assigned to these different colors of the orbs. My experience has been with the amber like colored orb that I described, that I took a video of, and then also 3 or maybe 4 times the other kind of orb that was sort of like a white sparky type of a color. Um, Yeah, so that was the coloration of the orbs that I experienced. But I've heard many different colors, and Deanne talked about um, uh, blue orbs. I've heard people describe green orbs, and even orange or reddish orbs. So interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Deanne. That was insightful and powerful and very helpful in helping us to understand what we're talking about. Thank you, Heather, for loving that as well. Um, Heather says, excuse me, y'all. I've only seen orbs on my digital camera. Now that's interesting because the evolution of the camera has really changed our means of capturing sort of these experiences of interaction that we have. And what orbs specifically have looked like previously and all through the different versions of cameras as we've gone now into digital cameras, right? Um, and the different ways that they've shown up, right? In film versus now digital footage, and videos that we capture even on our cell phones, right? Um, yeah, definitely you can experience those phenomena. Now, previously, some of those things have been explained away with just the function or misfunction or malfunction of like earlier versions of cameras and film and what happened in the processing of film and so forth. But not all of them, right? So even back then when we were using that kind of equipment, we had experiences that had remained unexplained, right? Um, Heather says, I have a photo of a green orb, but also a rose, a rainbow edged one, and orange one, and also a golden one. Wow, that's quite an array. And that's powerful. Next time I'm in town, and that needs to be sooner than later, right? Um, and I can just come and visit. But yeah, please show me that. I would love to see that, and you can even share that with all of us if you like. I don't know if there's a way for you to just drop that in the chat or what, but maybe you can mail it to me. Everyone, actually should have put it in the description, and I'm going to start doing that now and forward. If anyone doesn't have my email, please know that it is E as in Apple, E as in Edward, A as in Apple, S as in Sam, E as in Edward, U as in up, C as in Charlie at gmail.com. Ease UC, EASEUC at gmail.com. Thank you. Heather, yeah, very, especially that golden one, right? That one really intrigues me because I have heard of golden orbs, and they've always have been in spiritual reference. So that one's very interesting to me. All of them are, but that one in that particular way. Deanne says I caught orbs. I too have caught orbs with my camera. Um, I have a photo of an orange orb. Okay, all right, all right. Definitely have heard about orange colored orbs. In fact, I believe part of the Rendlesham Forest experience involves an orange or reddish colored orb. For those who are familiar with the Rendlesham Forest experience, if not, you can certainly look it up. It's very wide known in the ufology community. There's a lot of information relative to it. Heather says, I haven't figured out how to add photos here. Okay, no problem. Like I said, you can always email it if you want, or we'll figure out how to go through that and share it. And then DN came back in and says, I have captured orbs after feeling compelled to take a photo. Same, right? So I do think that, and Heather came in and said the same. I think that often these beings, entities, intelligences, however you want to describe them, want to have the interaction with us, right? So they sort of reach out to us. And Dan says, I don't know how to add photos here either. I don't know either, y'all. Don't worry about it. Okay, she says, I sent some photos to your cell phone. Thank you, Deanne. Appreciate that. Need that. By the way, has anyone taken notice of the image when you first come to my YouTube channel? Okay, that is an image I took of the sun with an, you could say, an orb, right? A very large orb, because it looked like it was about, I want to say, a tenth or so the size of the sun in the photo. Somewhere around there. I don't know, I may be off, but certainly very large and noticeable. It is a different light source than the sun. You can see that it is not the same light source as the sun, but there it was right there in the sky, looking like it was, sharing or occupying space with the sun. So that is very interesting. And still to this day, I've put out the open invitation, And to this day, no one has offered me a credible explanation or even a viable attempt at debunking that. So um, I'm very interested to know what you all might think that is. Um, Check it out next time you come to the channel. Just take a good look at that. You can see, wait a minute, this is another light source. So, like, did I capture a UFO? Did I cap or a UAP of some sort? Did I cap? Well, I guess it would have to be a UAP of some sort because we don't have a description of it. It is unidentified. It is aerial in nature. It was in the sky and it's some form of phenomenon. So that makes it UAP. Okay. Now getting back into what this looks like in compromising vessels. Okay, here Heather comes back and it says, one time I had my screen up on digital camera and orbs were zooming by like cars on a highway. I spoke to them and said, slow down, I want to see you. Then one slowed down and stopped. Ooh, in the, let's see, what else were you saying? In the something, I guess in the middle of the road or something. Wow, that's clear interaction of an intelligent level between you and those orbs. That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Heather. That's powerful. So getting back into what this could mean, um, folks, there are certain ways that it has proposed that nefarious or dark extraterrestrial or extra dimensional beings or entities have used some very nefarious low vibrational methods or methodologies that these beings and or entities have utilized in compromising um, people's vessel, right? And all these descriptions, we were talking about extraterrestrial beings and extra dimensional beings. The purpose of introducing that into the conversation is so that we can lay the framework of what it is that's doing the possessing or the compromising of one's vessel, right? So to go back in, okay, they were zooming by like cars on the highway. I spoke to them, and one stopped in the middle of the screen and did a loop. And then it went off the opposite side of the screen. Wow, deep. It was amazing, and more than one person was there to watch the screen and witness that loop. Now that's deep, and I have too. Also, in some of these instances, y'all, it wasn't just me. There was other people there. Like the time I saw the loop and recorded it, there were other people about to go into the movies, and I sure enough, I stopped them, and I was like, "Y'all see this? Like I see it, right?" And they did, and were taken aback by it the same way. This chat only lets you type so many words at a time. So that's for the breakup of thoughts and sentences. Oh, no worries. We got it. We get to it. But yeah, but both of you, please give me your thoughts on how this relates to the phenomenon that I've termed and others have termed vessel compromisation, right? Because I started to talk a little bit about how nefarious or dark or negative low vibrational frequency being extraterrestrial and or extra dimensional beings and or entities um, utilize these very dark low vibrational frequency methodologies that I'm about to describe as means to compromise someone's actual vessel, their physical body, right? Um, I have heard it stated where if a person is frightened or shocked and or frightened, and to an extreme enough level that you are literally on the cusp of death, right? Your consciousness your actual spiritual being is contemplating, like essentially hitting the eject button, right? And saying, whoa, this is something bad about to go down. I'm getting up and out of here. Okay. And that while you are in that state, however brief it may be, you are susceptible to having your vessel compromised. I've even heard it stated, and this, I believe the first time I heard this is by my Masonic friend that I believe I spoke about previously, who I met in the penitentiary of all places. Those of you who don't know, that that's in my background about 30 something years ago. But there nonetheless, and certainly some very powerful and interesting things that did happen there as well. I have so many stories. I could probably just do a whole hour-long video or 2 hours, maybe even, relating incredible stories of things that have happened to me in my life, and people and or beings slash entities or whatever I've come across and interacted with. It would literally blow your mind if I shared all of them. But anyway, um, he and I talked, and he spoke about how you can um, temporarily sort of rupture the connection between the spiritual self and the physical body. And that in that moment, yes, another consciousness could sort of supplant the original consciousness that that vessel was designed for. Um, so, so that's what we're talking about when we say vessel compromisation, and that's one particular method. I've heard it stated where there are actual. Um, this is accomplished by an actual physical parasite, right? That once it makes its way into the brain, or onto the neural stem of a human being, it really actually wraps itself around the nerve stem and coming out of the brain. And actually, no, I take that. I say that again incorrectly. I said that incorrectly. I was told, and I believe I even saw a video um, referring to this as well, where it went in and wrapped itself around the optic nerve and traumatized the optic nerve to a point that they brought on a certain level of brain death, right? Um, and compromised the individual in that way. Um, and in either instance, it's almost like the person has died, right? In terms of the level of disconnect between their spirit or their consciousness and the physical vessel. However, remember that this is a vessel that has been sort of custom spun forth for that particular consciousness and or spirit, right? So though I wasn't initially aware of it, I have since become aware of methodologies in which the vessel can be reclaimed, right? Where the information I previously received stated that that would be impossible. I'll jump back in the chats real quick. Okay, so um, Heather says, interesting topic. Yes, very interesting. Deanne states that could also be called a walk-in. A walk-in is a phenomenon that is part of this conversation in this genre. A walk-in is a little bit different. A walk-in occurs when, at some point in a person's life, another consciousness, literally, I guess figuratively, I'm saying this, does it like a tag team and sort of like tags out, and another consciousness tags in. That can happen in a number of ways for a number of reasons. Sometimes there are actual spiritual contracts before that person was born, that more than one consciousness will live a lifetime or portion of lifetime in that vessel. Sometimes it can happen when you're at such a low vibrational frequency through whatever means of where, if you get arriving at that frequency, you're at such a low vibrational frequency that your connection to your physical vessel is temporarily or partially fractured, and then another consciousness has an opportunity to walk in, so to speak, and establish that connection. There have been certain states that people have put themselves into, right? Sometimes with the aid of things like ayahuasca or other herbal assistance, right? That would put you in a certain state in which other consciousnesses can walk into your vessel and be a part of your physical experience in that way. There are instances where I've heard, I did this is a little more sketchy and esoteric, but that recently, incredibly recently deceased individuals can have a different consciousness. Like, in other words, a person can die, okay, and within a number of seconds or minutes, another consciousness and or entity can come into that vessel if the conditions are right, which we know one of the conditions is going to be the vibrational frequency is going to have to be low, because that act is a low vibrational frequency act in many instances, not all. But yeah, that's very interesting, Deanne. But that walk-in is certainly, yeah, that's part of this conversation, certainly. Deanne comes back and says, have you seen any videos with Pascal Najati in them yet? He may be a walk-in. He may be. Again, folks, there are some people who, on the other side of the veil, before acquiescing or sort of descending into physicality, that agreement can be made at the multidimensional and or spiritual level between two different spiritual entities, or whatever. It can make that agreement, and that can happen. Now, another thing that I didn't get into about the walk-ins, folks, there are, from what we understand, quite a number of different hybrids that are out there, right? And these hybrids live a certain percentage of their life, and at a certain level of maturity or at a certain age in their lifespan, I've heard it said that the species that they are hybridized with can then start to walk in as an alternative consciousness into that vessel and share experiences, and or in some instances take over the experience altogether. So there's that. There are it's a very wide spread, or not widespread, it's a very complex and nuanced subject and area of study where we're still uncovering different ways that this could potentially happen. I've heard it that there are technological ways that this can be accomplished, right? And so this could be that could attest for how some people in abduction scenarios have been abducted, and it is said that they have come back and they're not themselves. Some people have come back and stated that they're not that individual anymore. Okay. Incarnating. Thank you, D. You always help me out. Yes. Incarnating into a corporeal form. Thank you, Deanne, for catching me through my little lapses and freezes. But yeah, folks, this is interesting. And there are so let's get back into agenda. Okay. And agenda and interaction. So interaction between human beings, and not only the extraterrestrial beings slash entities, but also extra dimensional beings slash entities, has gone back a long ways, right? Potentially throughout all of humanity's existence on this planet. Okay. That interaction has been there on many different levels and with many different civilizations and or species. Now, it is said that there is a group of nefarious or archonic, or however you want to term it, species of beings or slash entities, extraterrestrial or extra dimensional in nature, that have enjoyed a certain amount of control over humanity for a very long time, potentially millennia, through the actual human ruling class of socially economic elites on the planet. Now, we know that through their secret societies, they do refer to hidden masters. Okay? We know that already. The question is, who are or what are these hidden masters? First of all, if they're hidden and they are not seen like the rest of us, then we're talking about extra dimensional, right? However, that doesn't preclude and could include extra terrestrial. And we understand that there is an agenda that they follow, which essentially is that when humanity is kept in a certain state of misery, pain, sorrow, a low vibrational frequency state, we do give off that sort of energy out into through the grids of the planet, the electromagnetic grids of the planet, and into the quantum field. And it is said that these nefarious beings or entities, either extra dimensional and or interdimensional, extraterrestrial and or interdimensional, that these beings or entities feed off of those low vibrational frequency emissions from humanity. In other words, when we are in misery, pain, and hate, when we are suffering, when we are going through low vibrational frequency conditions of our existence, it's a meal for them. Wrap your head around that, take a minute, and start to paint the big picture. Okay? And we see exactly how this has gone on and how they operate. So that would show you why the socially economic elite ultimately run the world the way they do, keeping us in the conditions that they keep us in. Okay. And who it is that is behind the compromising of our vessels on whatever level or through whatever methodology and or technology they would potentially be using to do so or accomplish this. You can also start to take all the other information from all of our other podcasts and surmise it all and make the correlations to this conversation, and you paint yourself an even bigger picture that I know for me and certainly for you all, I would imagine makes you say, wow, deep, deep. So yeah, folks, that is essentially what we're looking at. It is up to us to increase awareness, right? And to make sure that through the increasing and as a result of the increasing of awareness, we start to increase our rapidly increase our level of organization with one another and positioning of ourselves to take the appropriate compassionate, the appropriate and spiritually mature compassionate action in response to this. Now, keep in mind, again, as you paint that big picture, how much of this is actually going on in our society and how many individuals may have had their vessels compromised. But also always keep in mind the good news. Because of where we're at in our orbit around the center of the galaxy, right? This area of the galaxy or this house that we're in, right? Really has energies that foster and bring about the evolution in higher consciousness that we're experiencing on the planet today. And along with that comes an end to such programs and or agendas where individuals' vessels have been compromised. We end that in consciousness and in free will right now and forward. We end that right now in free will and consciousness now and forward. We end that in free will and consciousness now and forward. I state that because I told you all I'm spiritually the three, so I tend to do that sometimes catalytically in threes. But yeah, we are spreading the awareness so that we can again have the conversations, increase our level of interactivity with one another, trust and loving one another, organizing with one another, and taking the appropriate spiritually mature, compassionate action. We are deciding what our new paradigm looks like now and forward, not any other entity and or being and their agenda, but the human agenda, our agenda, people's agenda, or however you want to say it. Our agenda and our high consciousness is what shall steer us going forward as we forge and cement in our new high vibrational frequency paradigm. And I thank all of you for helping me to do that. Look for some upcoming videos that will just be like fact drops and data dumps on vessel compromisation and also the subject on tech that we had last week. Both of those, look for those coming out very soon, probably within the next day or two. I know I said that before. There's been a lot of interesting things that have been happening, folks, but I don't want to let that be an excuse. I will get that work done and get it to you. All right. Thank you all so much for being with me, especially super big shout out to Heather and Deanne having my back and being here with me and making sure that we had a wonderful conversation. I appreciate you all so much. I love you all, truly. Know that, right? And thank you for once again another episode of Building with Big King. And truly, truly accept my love and appreciation, my gratitude for helping to do what? To build the worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. Big King S.1. I love you all. Truly, I love you all. I appreciate you. And I am out.